breaking and entering, drunk and disorderly, law and order. A former prosecutor and a defence barrister, not your usual pairing. And the result? Conversations about crime and punishment that are guaranteed to get you thinking.
Welcome to Justice Matters, a weekly podcast with Lizzie Green and Jay Merchant. Our episodes are every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at Justice Matters Pod for clips. Enjoy the episode. This episode includes and deals with an officer-involved shooting of an Indigenous person. Discretion is advised. Good afternoon, Liz.
Hello, Jay.
How are you?
I am very well, as always. How about you?
Pretty good, thank you. There's no snow on the ground.
Oh, it's cold enough for me, though.
Is it?
Yeah.
Hey, look, this episode I want to touch on a culturally sensitive matter, and it happened in a remote Indigenous community, Unanimdu, and I apologize if I mispronounce that to anyone. I don't do that on purpose, but
I've been criticized for my pronunciation.
So I apologize. Uindamu is how I think it is. And again, our viewers can tell us one way or the other. But it involved the death of one Kumanjayi Walker, and that happened on the 9th of November, 2019. Okay. And so to give a little bit of a background, it is a remote Indigenous community. And in
the Northern Territory?
Yes, in the Northern Territory. Yes. So what I can say about those involved, there was, as I said in the intro, it was an officer-involved shooting.
Yes.
The officer's partner, and Mr. Walker, who was deceased after the shooting. So I'll just go into a little bit of background of all of them before we get into what transpired.
All right. Sounds
Does that sound good?
Yes.
So we have a 19-year-old Indigenous man named Kumanjayi Walker. He was a local to that area, and it was borne out in the coronial file that there was a criminal record that was dating back to when he was 14. Okay, it was unfortunate, and there were convictions for theft, assault, break and enter, and attacks against police and women. Okay.
Do we know whether he'd spent time in custody?
Well, I don't know if he spent time in custody, but for the circumstances leading up to the 9th, he was on a sentence where he would attend a treatment center, and he had a GPS tracking device on him. Okay. So I know that he had run-ins with police previously. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, the police officers that were involved was a Constable Zachary Rolfe, and he was, by all accounts, prior to what happened and what was, I guess, uncovered because of this, a young, decorated Northern Territory police officer, and he was awarded by the Governor General. He served previously in the Army. He went to Afghanistan. Okay, so by all accounts, decorated.
And was he white?
Yes. And then Constable Rolfe's partner, and that was Adam E. Burrell. Okay. So the events that transpired started on the 6th of November. I mentioned that Mr. Walker had a tracking device, and I shouldn't say Mr. Walker. I mean, I should, but he was a young person still at the age.
Yes.
And he had a tracking device on, and on the 6th of November, he actually cut the tracking bracelet off. And when you do that, I mean, that tracking bracelet's a court order. So there's a warrant. I mean, they will essentially come find you. Yeah. All right. You are wanted for that breach of that court order.
And I don't know for sure how it works in the Northern Territory, but I think the tracking devices have to be justified quite strongly to be ordered in Queensland. Like, they're not commonplace.
No, certainly, especially, on vulnerable people. So, and I'm not getting into a definition of that, but children, for instance.
Yes.
I can remember getting in all sorts of trouble for requesting a tracking device when I was prosecuting children.
Yeah, I think it's tough. So there must have been some justification to have that, and very bad of him to cut it off.
Yes. So it's the case that he cut that off. Now, that happened on the 6th, and what transpired on the 6th was quite intense in the sense that police actually located Mr. Walker, and a altercation happened. Now, this was all caught on body-worn camera footage. I should mention that the viewers and listeners and whoever can actually see a lot of the video footage and hear a lot of what transpired.
Right.
And it was confronting. As a former police officer, I can say it was confronting in the sense that it was quite scary.
For the police?
I would say for everyone,
okay.
to be honest with you. All right.
Sidebar.
Yeah, go.
Do you think that the body-worn cameras are good?
I do. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. I will say, though, and I'm dealing with a matter right now, that they can selectively be turned off.
I thought that was very difficult to do.
Yeah, well, I don't know a lot of police that do them, but I have a matter right now where one has been turned off, turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off, turn on. So wow. I don't see a lot of that. And I'm not saying that this happened in this particular matter, but I think they are good. I think they protect police as much as they protect the public.
Yeah. Okay.
Because everything, what you say, including some police officers saying, I'm recording, when they're speaking with other police, but also.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
But also the fact that, the public needs to have confidence. And if this either is in a good way or a bad way, at least it's out there. It's known there.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Keep going.
No, that's all right. At this incident in the house, when they actually located him after he had removed his bracelet, there was a physical altercation that took place.
Between police and him.
Yes, between a senior constable Smith and Mr. Walker. Now, it was, and like I said, the audio and the visual, you can tell that he's agitated. And there's a lot of history with police in that location, in that area. I've policed in some of these remote locations, and I can understand that.
Yeah,
I certainly.
That's a whole other issue, isn't it?
It is. It certainly is. But at this location, what happened is Mr. Walker presented an axe in a confined location.
Okay.
All right.
That's problematic.
So it is. So it was the case that it was a half a meter away from the officer. This is Senior Constable Smith. Now, an axe is an edged weapon. So I'm just going to get into a little bit of the training because I vividly remember it. My muscle memory is spot on with this because it's that serious.
Yeah.
All right. There is an area where if you are between 6 and 7 meters, now we're not going to pull out a tape measure.
No.
All right. And you wouldn't expect that to happen on the night in question, on any night in question. But police training, at least here in Queensland and in Northern Territory, is that if you are presented with an edged weapon, so a knife, scissors, what have you, you're within that 7 meters, you're in what they call the point of no return.
Right.
And the immediate reaction for use of force is to pull your Glock.
Not a taser?
Not a taser.
Really?
Yes. Because it is the case that if our producer over there came at us with something right now, I'd be done.
Really?
Yeah, I would be literally done.
But then, okay. I thought tasers were introduced to alleviate the need for potentially lethal force.
Not lethal force. What I can tell you about a taser, and I'm going to preface this with it's in my opinion because I don't want any suits. They are one of the most unreliable weapons out there. And I'll tell you why. There is 2 probes that come out of a taser. All right. So you fire a taser, the probes will go this way. Okay. If one of those probes do not go in, it does nothing.
Really?
Absolutely nothing. So a case in point, all right? Toronto, a police officer just very recently, a very angry man with a machete, female police officer unloads with a taser. Not effective.
At all?
At all.
Slowed him down?
No, because if one probe goes into you and one goes into the wall, nothing happens. all you get is a little bit of a prick from that.
So they both have to
They
connect.
both have to go in. And if they don't, you're toast. So think about it in the sense of we're about a half a meter away, but you're presenting a knife on me. I just don't have time. I don't have time. All right.
Okay.
So
he pulls out the axe.
He pulls out the axe. Now, if it were me, putting myself, knowing my training, I have the muscle memory, rip, work, reload, all of that for all our police listeners. My gut reaction is always pulling my Glock. And unfortunately, I'm going to use it.
And so other question.
Yes.
Is it true that if you fire your weapon, you are shooting to kill?
I wouldn't say shoot to kill, but I would shoot until the threat is no longer there. You keep firing until...
But so you're not aiming for a knee or...
No, you're not going for the shoulder. That is a myth. You were going for right here. Always right here. Okay. Because this is the mass, the central mass.
Because the justification being if you need to shoot, you're facing a fatal threat.
You are.
Is that why?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And edged weapons are that much more dangerous than, let's say, a firearm from 20 yards away. So edged weapons are taken to be the most serious.
Okay.
And the training that I received, that Glock would be out first thing. And
right.
Yes.
So that's pretty scary
to think
about.
It is in the sense that, and I never used my taser once and I never used my Glock, FYI, but I never liked the taser for that reason, because if you have a dynamic situation and you're starting to release or press the trigger on that taser, there is zero assurance that it's going to work.
But then what about, sorry, we're really off topic.
Good. We'll come back to it. We got time.
What about like the cases where people have died because of being tasered so effectively?
Yeah, and that might be the case if you have an elderly person, say, for instance, or somebody that has a heart problem. I'm not sure if you're thinking of an example or not.
Well, no, I know there was one where he had a heart condition. There was another one where 2 officers simultaneously fired, but it was multiple times.
Yeah, and so we're trained to deploy once and then reassess type deal.
Okay.
So there's a whole wheel, a use of force wheel, and everything from your baton to your communication to your handcuffs, your armed, closed-armed, and open-handed tactics. So there's a whole list.
Okay.
But from the very first day at the academy till my last day, if I was presented with a bladed weapon, it's always gun.
Interesting. All right.
Yes.
So what did he do here?
So this one was 0.5 meters away, and Senior Constable Smith, despite the fact that there was some sentiment that he was going to chop him, decided not to deploy his weapon. And he said that he had a previous relationship and a familiarity with the individual. And so that was the reason why he consciously made the decision not to engage with the firearm.
So from the body-worn camera footage, like, was he wielding the axe or was he just holding it?
Look, it was a very volatile piece of footage. I was very scared for the officer when I watched it.
Right.
And I was sitting there thinking, he's going to be shot.
Really?
Yeah. And the fact that he didn't was amazing in one sense. And I found it a little bit concerning, I guess, on the other hand, because that police officer doesn't know what's going through somebody's head when he is a few pages of criminal history. We're not going to get into that, but there's this sentiment that he's done something wrong in terms of cutting the bracelet off. And I felt very uncomfortable with how that transpired and how it was dealt with for that purpose. Now, I'm glad nobody got shot that night, and I'm glad that nobody was killed that night. But I feel uneasy, and I encourage you to watch it because I feel uneasy.
So how did it end?
Well, it ended, he fled. And then what had happened is that there was an agreement with the community members for an apprehension at a later date.
Okay.
Okay. There was a funeral and some sort of community function. And there was a plan put in place so that there was an apprehension of Mr. Walker.
So I'm confused though.
Yep.
If he's taken off his GPS tracker,
Yes.
he's armed with an axe.
Yes.
How is it possible for him to have fled? How is he not arrested?
Well, and that part I should have paid more attention to. At that point, I was still stuck on the fact that he went after somebody with an axe.
Right.
But it was the case that he left, and then a plan was put in place for a team to come in from Alice Springs and to assist with local police for apprehension.
Okay.
Okay. Now, on the 9th of November, this is where Zachary Rolfe and his partner Burrell come in. They end up,
3 days later.
Yes, 3 days later. Okay, because the funeral didn't happen, and it was supposed to be sooner, but there was
this grace period.
Yes,
okay.
There was a grace period. And on the 9th of November, then they located Mr. Walker at a house. All right. Now, they said that the purpose, and this is Zachary Rolfe and his partner at Burrell. They said the purpose to take up with him was to have a conversation with him. And at the time of the conversation, Mr. Walker gave them a fake name. It happens all the time. I mean, police. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So the purpose was to have a conversation.
Yeah, it was.
These euphemisms.
Yeah.
So were they there to arrest him?
Well, I can tell you right now, if it were me, I would be arresting him.
I know, but to have a conversation has such ambiguity. Like, what if they're there to arrest him? Say we went to arrest him, but if they weren't there to arrest him, then why the hell are they there? What's the conversation about? You can't just say have a conversation.
I'm with you on that, and it might come out. And I should mention that the coroner has not issued a decision yet or rendered a decision yet, but conversation was had. Let's put it that way, and as most people do, they'll give police the wrong name. I mean, it happened to me all the time. I just expected that.
Did you get proper made-up names?
Well, no, I didn't actually. I think improper in the sense that I would believe them if I wasn't a police officer.
Right.
Yeah.
But not like Mickey Mouse.
No, because that would just, Now, this is where things take a turn for the worse.
Okay.
It was at that point that he was going to be arrested and apprehended. And it was at that point that he resisted arrest, as most people do when they are arrested. Okay.
So, sorry, he was now being arrested because he gave a false name?
Well, no, and because of the fact that he'd cut off the GPS. That still hadn't been addressed.
To that.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And
but again, there was this grace period. So there was this concept of a controlled apprehension versus
letting it happen.
That's right.
But so was this all on body-worn camera?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, it was confronting, and it was something I've never seen before.
Okay.
And I don't need to see it again, nor does anybody else. But there was a resist arrest, and then it was very close range. So it was hard to make out some of what was transpiring on the video.
Right.
But what happened was after they entered the house, they somehow came up with this assessment that the threat level was low, despite the fact that he was wanted and GPS cutting off, and there was this accident incident.
Mm-hmm.
Then when Rolfe attempted to arrest Mr. Walker, he began resisting, striking Rolfe around the head and the neck with a hammer fist motion. Then, in a very split second, the police officer Rolfe noticed that there was a metal blade, scissors.
Could you see that on the video?
Yes.
Okay.
I could see it at some point.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he switched on this concept of, life or death situation. It was a case that Rolf was stabbed in the shoulder and allegedly attempt to grab the Glock. Okay.
So
And
why do you say allegedly there? Could you not see that on the video?
I couldn't see the grabbing of the Glock.
No.
But on the accounts from those that
were there,
he grabbed the Glock.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to keep it to what I could see, and I couldn't see that.
Okay.
I could see the scissors at some point, and I did see evidence that there was a puncture and an injury. All right. So in all of this melee that's going on, the first shot was fired at 7:22 p.m. Okay. At this point, Mr. Walker was standing up and struggling with the officers, primarily with Rolf first, but then it shifted to a barrel.
Okay.
Okay. The partner. And the shot hit the middle region of Mr. Walker's back. It was not fatal.
Okay.
Okay. It was not fatal.
But so when you say it went in his back, so he's struggling with...
He's got scissors and he has stabbed a police officer and he's struggling continuing with this.
But isn't that incredibly dangerous to his partner?
Oh, tell me about it. I saw the footage and I was cringing when I saw how it all happened. Okay.
Would that be proper protocol to fire a shot when the suspect is grappling with your partner?
And this is exactly what Rolf said at the coronial. I thought my partner was going to be stabbed to death. So he was protecting the life of his partner.
What if the bullet went through? Or does that not happen?
I'm not sure. Sorry.
Do we have those types of bullets in Australia?
I'm sure we do. The second shot was fired 2.6 seconds after the first shot. Now, this shot, the prosecution says, was completely different. Why? Because they say, and it's seen that Walker was on a mattress, either have fallen because of being shot or wrestled to the ground by a barrel. Okay? And they were literally pinning on the ground. All right?
Pinning him?
Yes. But there's still hands flailing. There's still stuff going on.
Was he on his back now?
I don't know if he's on his back or his front. Okay. All I know is they're on the ground. There's stuff happening. But the 2.6 second shot after the first is what caused the problems for the prosecution. Police. And we'll get to that.
Oh, for the prosecution.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. The third shot was fired about 0.5 or 0.53 seconds after the second shot. And this is where the accused, the police officer Rolf, held the Glock pistol to the point blank against the mid-region of Kumanjayi Walker when firing. Okay, so it was very close range. Yep, very close range. Now, what happened here was Mr. Walker was still alive, okay, and Constable Rolf commenced CPR until Mr. Walker could be taken away to the emergency facilities. All right. On the night in question, you see him being spoken to by police. You can see him taking off his vest. You can see all sorts of stuff.
This is Rolf?
Yes.
Yes.
He was cleared by police for the shooting. And then days had passed and he was flown to Alice Springs. Now, that was on the guise of a welfare check. And that's what he...
Because of the incident.
That's right. And it was the case that he was charged with murder.
Okay, so a couple of questions.
Yes. And I'll do my best.
All right. If we go back to the scene.
Yes.
Was Walker making threats, like verbally?
You could tell he was agitated. You could tell that he was non-compliant in terms of verbal and that stuff. I could not tell, and I'm sure somebody either in the police or somebody out there will let me know if I'm absolutely wrong, but I could not see that he was until such time as the arrest happened, aggressive.
And the scissors, weren't they little scissors?
I can't.
Wouldn't they have been seized as evidence?
Yes, the scissors were there. Where I'm struggling at is I don't decipher little scissors and small scissors and big scissors. They're still edged weapons.
Oh, there would have to be a difference in your response to like nail scissors versus kitchen scissors.
I'm not sure that there would be.
Really?
No, sorry.
Okay.
I'm not sure that I would be.
Mm.
And that wasn't part of the trial either. It was accepted that it was an edged weapon.
Okay.
Full stop. I don't discriminate against edged weapons. You could get a nail file out. You could get anything that's edged, and I'm immediately in high alert.
But it is curious, for want of a better word, that 3 days earlier we had an axe.
Yes.
And no show of force.
Yes.
And now we've got what I'm pretty sure were little scissors.
Oh, I think they were 10 centimeters in length.
Were they?
In length. So I don't know if that includes the shaft and the thing that you put your fingers through.
3 gunshots as a result.
Well,
anyway.
this is where this, the public now expects, because the police officer in the axe didn't pull out his firearm, that everybody else should not pull out their firearm.
Not an expectation, but I guess.
Or pull out a taser or use pepper spray. And I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way.
All right. Well, we'll come back to that. But my last question was, you said you could see Rolf taking off his gear.
This was after. This was when he was at a police station. I don't know the time frame.
Oh, because what was his demeanor like? Like, did he seem distressed?
He did, actually. And I think what was partly misconceiving on my part was I didn't realize he was actually doing CPR to try and maintain Mr. Walker life to preserve.
I guess you can't just.
No, you're trained to, but I didn't.
Leave someone to bleed out.
And you're trained to. So if, like I said, if I had to pull out my Glock and I had to fire, I would like to think, but I'm trained to go down and preserve life the best that I can, despite the fact that I've shot that person.
Because you're shooting them to disarm them.
Well, you're to stop the immediate threat.
Yeah.
And the lethal threat.
So it's not because you actually want to kill them necessarily. You know what I mean?
No, you need to put the threat. Yeah.
Oh, it's very difficult. And I just have in my head that my child wants to be a police officer. It's fraught. It is fraught. It is a hard job.
I've got stories for them if you want. We can get together.
Know.
So he's actually charged. So there's a big...
Charged with what?
Murder.
Really?
Yes. And it wasn't the first shot. The first shot was deemed appropriate in the circumstances. Okay?
In the back.
Well, he was standing up, struggling with and holding a pair of medical scissors, 10 centimeters long, shot in the mid-region. And from what I can see, it was in the back. But you have to watch the footage. It's not like he was turned around and there was not a dynamic situation.
Okay.
It was full on.
Okay.
All right. Now, the Crown conceded that the first shot was legally justified. Okay. And that was because he had just struck Constable Rolfe with the scissors, and Walker was struggling with Constable LeBear, still having those scissors. Now, it was the case that the second and third shots were the problem for the Crown. And they contested that the situation had changed dramatically between the first shot, the second shot, and then the third shot.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, he was shot. He was injured.
Yes.
And
no longer upright.
No, they were on the mattress. I concede that point as well. And so the Crown argued that there was no legal justification for firing the second and third shots.
I would have to think that charging a police officer with murder as a result of this kind of scenario would be rare.
It is. And there was a political overtone to it as well. So you had, and I don't know if they're premiers or what they are in the Northern Territory. I apologize, Madam or Mr.
I'd say it would be a premier.
Premier or First Minister or whatever. But he flew up there and said, there is going to be stuff happening because of this.
Had there been sort of public outrage in the community
absolutely.
about Walker's death?
Yes, absolutely. He was well known in that community, that remote Indigenous community. And despite his background, he was loved by the community.
Yeah.
And he had a deep sense of roots for his community. And they were pissed. And I understand that. I get that. You know what I mean? What they see is they have a white police officer shooting one of their own.
Yeah.
And killing one of their own.
And a young person.
And he's young. And yes, he might have history, but set that aside. He is young and part of that community.
So what did they say about the second and third shots?
Well, his justification for it was self-defense, in the sense that he was, and sorry, let me go through them first. It was self-defense.
For the first shot?
The first shot is not an issue. The first shot's out.
So he's still saying self-defense for the second shot.
Well, he needed to defend himself or his partner.
Okay.
Because the scissors were still somewhere around them. And I do believe I did see a photo of the scissors in the hand at some point on the mattress. I could be wrong. He was acting in the course of public duty and acting in good faith.
So, okay, let me take you back to your experience as a police officer. So you have shot someone. They're now lying down, possibly still struggling. But does that change the nature of the threat? Like, if you can accept that the first shooting was justified because he had a weapon and was attacking your partner.
He was stabbing you and then your partner. Yeah. So no, I accept the first shot is
fine.
Yep.
Well, not fine.
Not fine, but I know what you mean.
But so then that second shot, doesn't the threat level change if he's like, would your response no longer be to shoot?
I can tell you that the only thing that concerns me is, and keep in mind, there's so much adrenaline going, and I've never been put in this position, nor do I want to, nor should anybody. But the only thing that would even remotely suggest more shots would be if there was still stabbing. You know what I mean?
And I suppose it's like seconds is very short.
But it was, can I tell you, it was, I'm still picturing it. It was extremely difficult to watch because you had, and I don't know if I'm going to do it anyways, but you had them very close together and you can see him pulling his partner and then going and firing. And so that to me was very, very confronting and very unorthodox.
Like deliberate?
Oh, no, but yeah, it was deliberate, but it was just something that I've never trained to do something like that. So it was just very unorthodox. But
so I'm sensing your training wouldn't have prompted you to shoot a second time.
It's hard to say, but I can say this. If I saw stabbing, I would do whatever the hell it took to stop that.
But there wasn't evidence, was there, that he was still stabbing?
It was the case that
they just didn't know where the scissors were.
Well, no, he thought that there was scissors still and that there was still struggling going on with the scissors, so that there was immediate threat still because the scissors were there. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not making that argument. I'm just saying that's
what he said.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say. I felt uncomfortable, but I can, if it had been the case that there was still stabbing,
well, that changes
things, and I'm just not sure there was.
Okay,
but the scissors were still present, and there was still struggling despite being shot.
All right, so that's the second shot. What about the third shot?
What can I tell you about the third shot again? This one,
like, it seems like a fatal shot.
Yeah, this is the one that was point blank because remember, he did this shot and then went in and So, again,
But I think you said it was a very short time frame between the second and third shots.
Yes, and defense argued that he was justified in continuing to defend his partner. Okay.
Oh, it's messy, isn't it?
It is, and I'm so glad I'm not involved in that or was up there. All right.
So he's charged.
He's charged, and he was charged in some precarious situation because they had covered up the fact that, he was flying to this area for a welfare check, and bam, he was charged. So it was
an ambush.
It was an ambush.
Yeah.
Now, what makes matters difficult for Mr. Rolfe is, and indeed the Northern Territory Police Service, in my opinion, is that there's some character evidence that is uncovered.
Right.
All right. And this character evidence, I'm going to start with Rolfe, and then we'll get into the broader community, I guess.
Okay.
But it was uncovered, and I'm going from the coronial.
But hold on, should we finish off? Oh, this came out in the trial?
Well, this came out in the trial. It was just whether or not it could be used or not.
Okay.
So we can still go through this. But essentially, it was uncovered that there was a series of text messages that were arguably racist, sexist, homophobic, and contempt for what he called bush cops.
Okay.
And
by bush cops, do they mean Indigenous police officers?
I'm probably the most naive person when it comes to that. I don't know what a bush cop was.
Okay.
When I was a cop, I was called a lot worse.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, poor Jay.
I know.
Yeah.
It's because I'm Canadian. But and some of the language, I'll probably get cut off for this too, but it was the one of the text message reveals a comment such as fuck, they are gay cunts. The order of preference is blacks, chicks, gays, and lazy fucks. Now, it was a case.
This is sent by Rolfe.
Yes. It also shows contempt for superiors, stating that this station is a mess and bosses don't have a clue. Police who go out to bush is lazy and do not work.
He had a lot of opinions, didn't he?
Yeah. And
this is someone who had gotten commendations.
He boasted about using force in texts and videos, such as treating him to the old illegal shoulder charge, and played video with oots sound effects. And there were incidents that were alleged of documentation for use of force. So whenever you use of force, there's paperwork. There's a lot. But in one instance, and again, this was at the coronial, he admitted that in the incident he slapped and punched somebody to the head, but no paperwork was filled out.
Okay, I'm not really liking.
So this stuff came out during the criminal trial, but there must have been some applications to exclude on prejudicial basis. I don't have the transcript from the trial.
So presumably the jury didn't hear that.
I don't want to say yes or no on that.
Okay.
I'm unclear on that. All right.
But what was the outcome of the trial, Jay?
Oh, the outcome of the trial was that he was not guilty.
So I'm guessing the jury didn't hear that stuff.
Yeah. Not guilty. All right.
Because I have to tell you that where I was following along with the use of force broadly,
right?
I hear that stuff that he's written himself, and I think, okay, you're not a good person.
Well, and that is why there's so much controversy around this matter, is that this is somebody that might not be of good character, that is in the police service with a firearm, and so, and
also, sorry, but not intelligent either. If you're going to be writing things like that, that can then be retrieved and used against you. Like, the stupidity of that is untold. You might think those things. I don't, but some people might think things, but to write them.
Well, and in a public forum, I guess text message.
So ridiculous.
So I look at it as, there's some variables behind what transpired. Now, whether or not that changes anything on the day in question, I'm not sure. That's a matter for you and the viewers, I guess, to have an opinion on, because you're faced with a very volatile situation. Now, can we come back to that? Because I want to get into this. Now, the community themselves were outraged, and I get their point. I take that. I mean, you have a white police officer taking the life. It should never happen. In an ideal world, it would never happen. their sentiments, and it was actually Narelle Bedford who put me on to the clip of the Indigenous community and their response. So I appreciate that. If Narelle's listening, thank you very much.
She's one of our professors.
She's a legend at Bond University.
Yes.
But there is so much anger and sadness in the voices of the elders. It's tough to watch. It really is. And they're pleading for, when is this going to stop? When are we going to have police without any guns? There's no need for guns. And, you know, it was something that was very hard to watch.
I think it's very difficult as a white person to have to have opinions in some cases on perspectives from Indigenous communities and Indigenous persons, because there is no way for me to have any true understanding of their position.
And I don't either. I am the most naive person when it comes to that. I struggle and I feel bad.
But I have done some training in, you know, to try and better my understanding or awareness. And I think it's not that whole scenario with a white cop and an Indigenous offender is just so stereotypical because it happens far too often.
Yeah, and it's the same in Canada. I'm just going to go out on a limb. Like I was not familiar with it. Now I make a point of teaching about reconciliation in residential schools. And we have these concepts and principles in Canada called Gladue reports, where the histories are a must to be taken into consideration. The trauma, the history of both them and their ancestors must be taken into consideration. And so I'm trying to educate myself too, but I've never come across something quite like this. But I want to talk about, and if you don't mind, I want to talk about something that became evident in the Coronial and something in the Northern Territory Police Force that is an embarrassment to that police force. And I'll go on the record and say it right now. But there is a history of derogation of Indigenous peoples in that police force. And I'm saying this very clearly because there was what became evident, something called a Coon of the Year award.
Wow.
And this is an award that links unhygienic, potentially sexual inappropriate behavior to Aboriginal people. I have never been more disgusted to be a police service member when I saw that.
It also makes you just feel ashamed of being
dirty and just complete and utter. I don't even know how to describe it. I am so angry.
How do people know about that?
Well, because there was testimony and there was witnesses, and you have one sergeant who was a runner-up for that award in 2007 giving evidence. Now, if this is something that's happening in 2007 and we're now in 2025, that premier needs to fire every police officer in the brass, so all the executive that knew about this.
Yeah.
If they want real change, start from the top down and make change. Because this is an absolute disaster.
That is appalling.
It is disgraceful. And you know what? Like I said, it happens in Canada as well. Take this, for instance. And I am going to name this officer because I can in Canada. But this happened in Calgary. And you had Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And this happened in March 20th of 2022. You have a photo and there is video. This is from cbcnews.ca. But you have a Constable David Willem who is on camera assaulting an intoxicated, handcuffed Indigenous man by grabbing him by the hair and throwing him to the ground. Okay. and the victim's head hit a cinder block wall and then the floor. This is a police officer.
Tell me that they didn't die.
No, they didn't. But this sentence, and I am going to be a little bit careful because I don't know if it's being appealed, and if the Crown prosecutor is listening, I would be appealing this sentence. But there is a 1-year conditional sentence handed down. So essentially 6 months house arrest and 6 months curfew. This police officer should be in prison.
Did he keep his job?
No.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of. All right. So it happens all over. And if we're talking about reconciliation, this is a huge setback. And the Kuhn Awards and everything that is transpiring in the Northern Territory, and it's not just the Northern Territory.
No, it's not.
I will say that in my tenure as a police officer, I did not see or observe anything like that.
Really?
So I'm very proud of that and those that I served with.
I think my knowledge is not about police treatment necessarily of Indigenous suspects or offenders, but I do so much research into sentencing.
Yes.
And the overrepresentation of Indigenous persons in our criminal justice system is appalling.
Oh.
And particularly it is Indigenous women and children.
Yes.
Who seem to make up such a huge percent of those
juveniles
cohorts. And I just think, how are we still just talking about these things in 2025? How is there not material change?
Yeah.
Everybody knows that it's a problem.
Yeah.
But where is the impetus for change?
Where is the change? If we know that these awards were happening in 2007, I want to see something happen.
Concrete.
I want
consequence.
Jobs lost and real change transpiring, whether it's up in the Northern Territory, whether it's in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, whether it's in the United States or wherever. I'm just furious.
We should be better than that. Yeah. I know. I love your passion for this because it is something that it needs a light shone on it, and it needs that level of disgust and non-tolerance.
Yeah.
Like we have to be better.
We do. And I expect better.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad case for Mr. Walker in particular. I'm not sure justice was served there when I hear those things about Rolf.
Well, I think we'll see more when the coroner hands down the finding. And I hope...
See more what?
Well, more words.
More words.
Sorry, but that's how I knew about some of this was the words, right? And if we can spend some time on our podcast talking about it, hopefully somebody will listen. Hopefully somebody will run for office and try and change something, I
do say that to my students. I'm sure you do too. It's up to our lawyers of the future to be aware of these things and act for change.
Yeah.
But thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
That was something I think we all needed to hear.
Yeah, and I hope that the viewers and listeners get back to us as well.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed it, please rate and review the podcast. If you're interested in clips, check out @Justice Matters Pod on TikTok and Instagram.